Hey everyone, it's Zero Gravity reporting on behalf of Big Gold Belt Media. So usually Nigeria has me on the show to talk about some horror films, but today I'm gonna switch it up a little bit and put y'all onto something different. So stay tuned for my review. Yesterday, I sat down for my nightly Fantastic Fest screenings and decided to put on this documentary called The Found Footage Phenomenon, directed by Sarah Appleton and Phillip Escott. And I was pleasantly surprised. Well, not surprised. I'm a found footage fan, so of course I was going to enjoy it. But I learned a lot in this documentary. If you're a fan of the Cursed Films docuseries or the horror noir documentary, both of them on Shudder, I highly suggest trying this one out as soon as it drops. You will love this one as well. So, this documentary covers the stigma of found footage horror being the ugly stepchild out of all of the subgenres of horror, how the subgenre was born, and how it's evolved over the years, as well as the hardships and whatever else goes into making and creating the fear that comes with found footage. It's all about media and how media has affected how we view things and what we think is real. As a child of the late 90s, I did most of my growing up during the early 2000s. So, naturally, as a young horror fan, I spent a lot of time in the very dark corners of the internet, wondering what I was seeing, if it was real or if it wasn't real, rotten.com. Sorry, mom and dad, but that's what it was. But to this day, I still don't know if it was real or not, which now I understand is the point, especially when it comes to shockumentary cinema, which goes hand in hand with found footage horror, which I learned in this documentary. Check it out, shockumentary, very interesting concept. But guys, it's deep, man. It's deeper than surface level. You know, authenticity, truth telling, like in news and media, realism. These are techniques that, even with high budget films, are really, really difficult to produce. And even in sometimes that I've learned in this documentary, that money and higher budgets can actually ruin the effect of how we look at something as real. It's really interesting concept to think about. But I learned a lot here, and especially coming from some of the interview subjects, you can't not believe these guys. The interview subjects include representatives from one of my favorite movies, Cannibal Holocaust, which I understand can be frowned upon, but Cannibal Holocaust, The Blair Witch Project, Wreck, Nurai, The Curse, and Megan is Missing, which I realize has a really prominent TikTok exposure at this point. But when you think of found footage horror, you think of these films. So who better to listen to on educating you on the subject than the representatives from these films, the people who had their hands on creating that level of fear, where I don't know if this is real or not. I can't really tell. That being said, I am super excited to dive into some of these more obscure titles that I've never heard of that were name dropped by these interviewees. And, who better to listen to than these people? But what I'm not thrilled about with this documentary, which is pretty much the only thing that I can complain about, for the most part, I'm a student in this position, so there's not much negative that I can't say, except for the strong feeling of pettiness of whatever that kind of poser phenomenon you might think towards Cloverfield, which is my jam, man. Cloverfield is my absolute jam. And it seems like, from watching this documentary, that prominent figures in the found footage horror community are not really big fans of this one. And after watching the documentary, I can understand why. But here I am just saying, Cloverfield rocks, although it is a big budget film. But now, after watching the documentary, I have learned that found footage spawns from a very low budget place. And maybe it should stay that way. Maybe big budget films should just use found footage as just a mode to tell stories, not exactly in the found footage subgenre of horror. But it's really unique. It's very culty. I learned a lot. As I said earlier, I learned a lot, especially with the history dating all the way back to, War of the Worlds. That radio broadcast was one of the first instances of found footage horror. Even though it wasn't footage at all, it was a radio broadcast. Through media, we still get that same effect. And it really has me thinking about things these days where horror can really be anything. Just turn on a news channel. And, the footage, the mode of media makes it a little more real for all of us, especially living in an age where we all have phones, we all have cameras easily at our disposal. So, it seems that has that little forbidden aspect, or, I have put myself in danger. I really shouldn't be recording these things, which is pretty creepy if you think about it. But even if you're not a fan of found footage horror, I highly suggest you check out this documentary. You might learn a thing or two. You might be, influenced to maybe check out the genre and have a little more faith in what might be there for you to explore. For me personally, these are the only films that will have me up at night. And I think that's for a very good reason, which is, explained in this documentary here. So that being said, I urge all horror fans, maybe even not horror fans, non-fans of found footage horror, just give this documentary, The Found Footage Phenomenon, a shot. You might learn something. You might feel more open to exploring the genre a bit more, even from a media standpoint. So please check out The Found Footage Phenomenon. It made its US debut this past weekend at Fantastic Fest 2021 for a good reason. And before I go, let us know in the comments, what's your favorite found footage horror? Mine's Cannibal Holocaust. Thanks for watching.